So
I know what this is, but I just want to be clear that we're talking about, this is
in
the.
this case,
the
it's
agency
Moody's,
that's
right,
rating
yeah,
us.
exactly.
And that's what we'd go to for any future
Right.
bond.
Each time we're doing it, it's Moody's. It's always been Moody's. I just don't want people to get completely confused, because there is a standard in wars.
So, yeah,
We
that's
don't
not the
use
only
them.
one, but I'm just curious to know, I just want to say.
Occasionally, what will
What are we
happen,
using?
is that you will see something like, our First Southwest will say, well, we've been thinking about going to Standard & Poor's because they have a slightly different rating way, and if we wanted to get it up just a hair, we might be able to use them because they put a bigger weight in this area, and you happen to have the weight in that area. Hasn't happened. They stick with Moody's all the way through. And as I said, and by the way, I'm not putting you on the, but I'll wager a bet there's probably another rating service where you do loans and stuff. There's probably another one that I'm not aware of or whatever.
I'm not aware of one.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. I'm just assuming there's something else out there.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get us off
No,
track
no,
here.
no, we need to answer these questions. I want people to understand.
I'd like to get back to where we were at.
Right,
but,
so-
I just was curious of what we were using.
So, okay, so now what we've got here is Moody's, so we sit down, we get grilled for about an hour. Now, this is nothing new, okay? It's happened, well, I've done it 12 times, 13 times now over the last 10 years or so. So, the treasurer has to go through what is known as a disclosure period, which time that they put out all this information. Here's your audited reports, here's this, here's that, all these various bank statements and things that they require to see. Then once they have got that from the treasurer, they will call us up and say, okay, what are you planning on doing? And for an hour, they'll ask us different questions. Most of the time, it's I can almost fall asleep and do it with my eyes closed at this point, because most of the questions are usually the same, okay? This year, they did hit me with something that kind of threw me off, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but he says, well, how are you gonna handle the deficit spending you had the year before? And I go, what are you talking about, deficit spending? Hang on. We did, close out with a free cash, which is a positive number. And a lot of it had to do with his movements on the chart, which we were able to explain. So, ultimately, they go through the disclosure period, and then this comes back to us. This is their rating, which they come back and say, you still have a AA3 bond rating. Important to point out that while I was there, I tried to nudge the guy a little bit and say, you said if the prices of the houses went up, which they have, maybe you could juice us a little on the rating. And he says, well, I have to go before a tribunal to do that, and I don't know whether that's going to be enough to do it, and it wasn't. So, essentially, what I've been told several times in the past is this. A AA3 rating for a town this size is about as good as you're going to get, unless something incredibly large came along and changed, like you had $20 or $30 million in the bank, which ain't happened, right? Okay, or something even more bizarre than that. And
It'll be a fight.
it would be, yeah. It's going to be a challenge to get it up over AA3. Now, that's not to say that the AA3 isn't a good thing. It's as good as you're going to get for a town this size, I think. But I mentioned this to you guys the last time, and this is the thing. Now, this is brand new, okay? It's not the one that I showed you when we were doing those weeks ago, those budgets there, or the budget presentation thing, or the financial presentation. But it's going to read pretty much the same way. So it says, we're giving you this AA3, and it says, what's your credit strengths in the town of East Bridgewater? It says adequate reserves, provide financial flexibility. Above average resident wealth and incomes, that I'm not sure where the hell they're getting that, but I think what they're looking at, according to the assessor, is we are having a small renaissance here. I think that the houses are affordable here, and we are in the market is up all over, but we're having a little bit higher sell here than in some of the other towns. And then it says, growing tax breaks, approaching recession peak,
Pre-recession.
pre-recession peak, okay. Now, it says, what's your credit challenge? Okay, and we have an elevated debt burden, okay? This was on the last one that we said. Our debt is higher, and you can see it on there, than many of the surrounding towns that were there. I think, I can't even remember what the number was that I put up, but I think we were 3 or 4% higher in the debt area than were most of the towns that I had used as my set points.
Does that include like Whitman Hanson and West Bridgewater, who also built new high schools?
No, what I used in my piece was towns that were demographically like East Bridgewater. I can pull those back out again for you guys later, but what it was basically is they had a population similar to the size of East Bridgewater. They had a tax base, meaning ours is $5,800, and they were all within that. I think that was the one where we came out closest.
But were the towns, had those similar towns made similar capital investments into, educational structures and?
Well, in other words, they're shorter than we are on that, is what they're saying, is that, I mean, they didn't show you the individual pieces, they're showing you have an 11%, thing, as opposed to this guy who's only 9, or this guy who's only 8, or this town who's only 10. So ours was higher than these particular, now, those are the ones that I pulled, but they're saying it's higher than average for the people who are around. Now, what you might be getting at, okay, which actually does make sense, is if we have a $4.5 million annual debt payment, principal and interest, and $3 million of it, or close to it, is the new school, and then they're telling us that our debt is elevated, then
How is it relative to investment?
Right, okay,
It's not
so.
just the interest, it's the investment.
Right, so it is in fact, it's going to be that would be the thing that's tilting us probably the higher, okay? So, I mean, if that was what you were getting at, okay, so. Now, what they're saying is our, what's our credit challenges is, okay, we got the elevated debt burden, okay? We're reliant on full utilization of the Proposition 2.5 tax levy. For you guys again, and for the people who might be watching, we have a cap. We cannot go higher than Proposition 2.5 allows, which is 2.5% of the levy, which, for the sake of this particular argument, is about $500,000 to $550,000. There is no space in between that. Every year, we're going up the full $550,000, and that's what they're alluding to. You don't have any space in there to say, well, we could always go up a little bit. Well, you're right up at the peak, all right? Now, it says, factors that could lead to an upgrade: continued growth in reserves through established trend of structurally balanced operations, or a material increase in the tax base, improved wealth and income profile. So let's face it, what would be a material increase in the tax base? So something would have to happen that suddenly we were making, all the houses were worth, like Bel Air, California here or whatever, and the taxes is up. Probably not gonna happen. But continued growth in reserves is something that we've been doing now for years. It says factors that could lead to a downgrade: trend in operating deficits resulting in draws on reserves, okay? Now, I'm circling back around to that conversation that I had with Moody's when they were asking, what are these operating deficits in? What do you mean an operating deficit? Well, the larger portion of it was nothing more than transferences from one account to another, okay? And it really didn't establish anything like that. There was nothing wrong there. It's just that money was moved out and it made it appear as though there was something wrong. But it really went from account 1 to account 24 or whatever, okay? But there were several instances where we used free cash for operating budget, which is exactly what they were looking at and saying, you can't, that shouldn't be what you're doing. Now, another piece that I've added to this, and I already handed this thing out to you guys at the last meeting. Very last package. This is from City and Town. And this was done by Tony Rashis, who's the head of the deputy director of the Bureau of Accounts, okay? And I don't expect you guys to read this at this particular moment. It's the very last package. I don't expect you guys to sit down and read this, but it is an interesting read, okay, in that what he is trying to tell you in the course of this, okay, is identifying stresses on a municipal budget. One of the stresses that he goes about talking about in here is, again, the use of free cash or one-time reserves to try to balance out a budget and make it work. And there's a whole bunch of things here, and then he's talking about the municipal dashboard. And just before Erica left, Erica Fleming, she says, I went on the municipal dashboard and kind of made some charts up with it. Again, I don't want to spend an hour going over it. I think you guys need to read it. It's I don't know, it looks like 6 to 10 pages long. And it's an interesting read, okay? And then it starts to show you the trends, which I mentioned, but I think the biggest one that we want to talk about is the very first page is you see the trend for free cash, certified free cash. 2,080,000 was like your first thing, and that was for fiscal year 2016. The trend the next year was 1.9. Next year it was 1.5. Next year it was 1.3, okay? One of the situations that we've had, okay, here, which I have mentioned time and time again, free cash is a derivative of a number of things. How much space you've got between what you are figuring on that you're going to take in and how much came in above it or below it. And then how much money is being returned by the various departments. And put it all together, it goes into a fund, and then there's a calculation done. And then you have what is known as free cash, which means free of obligation. The word free cash for years has been something that people despise because it sounds like a bucket of money fell off the back of a truck someplace. It's free of obligation. So if we were a corporation or something to that effect, it would be a profit for the year. But we don't have a profit. So this is money that we took in that came in more than what we had estimated, and we were up, okay? However, there's been some, if it's the right analogy to use, some straw dogs in there for the last couple of years. And you notice that the free cash is beginning to start to go down. One of the reasons it was up so high in the first place was when we went over to the GIC. We had a $1.4 million savings in the first year. That went into the free cash area. It slowly diminished itself away, okay? But then there were a couple of other things that kept it artificially high. 2 years ago, when we closed out, we had a couple of things that came up. One was a $175,000 house that was sold. Another was a $300,000 state FEMA reimbursement for a snowstorm that took place 3 to 5 years earlier, okay? Now, last year, what was the big thing that kind of dropped in? We sold Hanson land for $400 and some odd thousand, okay? So on top of having a little bit of space in between what we were predicting was coming in and what we were actually putting out, we also had this extra 400 in there. But even with that, we're down to 1.3. Over the past 3 years, we have closed the gap on the space we had in between, and I'll say this, I'm not gonna put up an alarm. Okay, I think we will close with a surplus this year. I think the surplus is going to be, let's say, largely lower than what it was the last several years, because we have rated the free cash for use over the past 2 years, cutting off some $300,000+ worth of surplus. This was the thing that I mentioned to you fellows, or to everybody in the room, was one of the issues in the early 90s. When I showed you that picture that showed us in the hole or almost in bankruptcy, what had happened was the town took on what do I want to say? Decided to fund themselves by overestimating the receipts that they had coming in. So if you thought you were going to get 2 million in, but you really wanted to spend 2.5 million, then we'll just call it 2.5 million, and then we'll worry about it when the time comes. This resulted in that $800,000 deficit, okay, that we had. We were technically bankrupt at that time. After destroying that, then what the town did is they raided all the funds. And then we had $13 left in your stabilization, and I mean $13. That's not one of my, I'm gonna make a point statements. There was $13.50 in there on a town with, 30, $40 million at the time operating, and your bank account had $13 in it. That is what I see as we move forward, but we'll see what happens unless we have a trend. But right now, I do not expect next year you're going to see the same free cash. So let's take this. This, the Moody's report, is actually good news. They are verifying that, sure, we've got a higher than average elevated debt service, but we're backing it up, which was the entire rationale behind this particular account. We're backing it up with reserves and making sure that the town is insulated from, as they say, the trends of the state going up, down, and basically going nowhere, okay, for the last 8 years. So we have insulated ourselves with this, and it is a success up to that, and we'll keep going down from there. But, so, now here's the bond issuance, this is the Moody's report. The next thing that's happening is downstairs, like I mentioned to you before, they are downstairs signing off on that $1,627,000 bond issuance, okay? What does that make up? Well, if you pull this piece here, these were the things that we did for the last several years. So we did a $520,000 sewer extension, okay, that we voted at the special town meeting 12th day 2016. Okay, then we did 3 other things. A standby multi-bay garage, which by the way is, according to the thing, is gonna be a 20-year bond for $150,000. We did a DPW road improvements, which we've been doing for a number of years, $557,000, 14 years. And we did the school boiler, $600,000, 20 years, okay? Now, you're gonna say you add the two together, and that's not quite, it's actually $200,000 higher than what we're doing. We paid down on the sewer main extension $100,000 a year for the last 2 years, right from the same account. So even though we had authorized 520, we're really borrowing 320. Put the two together, and you've got $1,627,000. Now, what everybody loses on this is there are payments that have to be made once you've actually gone out to bond. So for somebody home who just bought themselves an automobile, okay, I bought a $50,000 automobile, and I'm gonna pay for it over the next 5 years. So monthly, I have a coupon payment that I have to pay off the $50,000 plus the interest. Okay, so what was the net result of this? Well, you have an additional $128,000 coming up next year, $128,539. FY21, you have to pay another $187, pardon me. 22, $125,937. In short, for the next 5 years, you get over $645,000 that needs to be paid through the budget. Now, everybody go, oh, geez, where's that money coming from? Well, when we did the bonding, okay, and when we authorized it, we put this money into the Capital Stabilization Fund in anticipation of what was going to be paid coming up. So we have the money in this account to pay for these items for the next 5 years. And if things keep going, we will continue to keep replenishing it, keeping ourselves 5 years in front of these payments. And making sure that if something goes wrong, we have the money to pay for what we've gone out and bought. The good news there again is, not only is this account funded for the next 5 years, but if we were to say, put on the brakes right here, we're not doing another thing, and we're gonna stay here and just do what we've already said we're doing, raising and appropriating the amount that had fallen off in the debt and keeping it in that account, it might erode a little bit for a couple of years, and then suddenly it's gonna start coming up. It'll maintain itself for the rest of the time here. It's balanced. It's right where it's supposed to be. The money's there, we're within our proposition 2.5. The fund is working. So there's what. Now, having said that, I made a copy of this. This is last year's town meeting warrant, okay? I know it's a redundancy, but if you go down to the debt service on here, this is page 27 up in the corner. What you're going to see is this is what was voted for debt service for 2019, the current year that we're in, okay? You will see Sachem Rock Center, junior, senior high school, middle school, additional debt, central school, doors and windows. These are all the things, as the years have gone on, that we have done bonding for. Now, some of these things are beginning to fall off because some of them go way back even before we started the capital stabilization fund. Most of the things that came prior to the stabilization fund are falling off in 2020. Then there's really nothing left. So now we're functioning totally on what we've done with the capital stabilization fund, with the exception of those things that we did a debt exclusion override on, which would be the school, the senior center, I believe it's the old middle school, and I believe that there's a bonding on the dump, putting a cap on the dump. So, essentially, all this stuff is gonna show up again next year in 2020 with an additional, which I haven't got on here, 4 more items, okay, all coming out to be, what did I say it was, $128,000 more. So you will read next year when we're doing the 2020 budget, there will be 4 more items under the principal and 4 more items under the debt, all of which have to be paid on the budget. And again, where are you getting the money for that? We're going to take it from the capital stabilization fund and offset the budget to the tune of about $900,000+, close to $1 million. So, now, let's get to the capital planning, just to talk about some of the things that we've done for the last several years. This is a reoccurring sheet that we have done moving forward, okay, where I keep showing you for 5 years all the things that we've done. Now, I'm gonna skip right forward to the last page, where it will show you a synopsis of what's happened over a 5-year period. So, if you look at our beginning balance, we had $2,335,000 in the capital planning, or in the capital reserve fund, okay? We transferred in from free cash some $2,172,000. We got interest on the investments of $81,000. We raised and appropriated another $2.4 million, meaning we put $7,065,000 into that account. Coming out, we had to subtract the debt service. We've done $2,970,000 that we've had to pay on for things that we bought. Okay, giving us an ending balance of $4,095,000, okay? Subtract your 5-year reserve, because we wanna keep that reserve in there, you've got $217,000 in the account, which if, as I recall, a year or so ago, you guys were trying to do some saving of money so that you could move forward for a much larger project, depending on what it is. That's where you are currently, okay? You have a $217,000, let's call it free of obligation at this particular moment. Now, that brings us to this year, okay? At this particular point in time, we have some $2 million. I'm going to say about $2.5 million. It's a combination of $465,000 plus $1,974,000 here. Now, this is the sheet that we use to take a vote in any one particular year on all the capital projects that have been submitted. This package contains all the capital projects that are submitted. This is a synopsis of them. And you'll note that for the free cash, there's a section, I call it one-time payments. I lined up all the ones that are small. In short, we're not gonna go out to bond on an $8,000 first aid kit, okay, first aid kits. You're not gonna go out to do something like that. You pay it directly from free cash. Now, does that mean it's gotta be that way? You know, if you guys choose, or we choose as a board to try to just, you know, put a bunch of them together and try to move it. I stuck to anything below 50,000, okay? I stuck to, let's use it as straight out of the free cash. This does not obligate you to do any of these, okay? All it does is it lines them up, and you have to go through them. If we did them all, you would need $465,000 worth of free cash. Now we come down to the bonding payments capital proposal, okay? You will see at the bottom there is $1,974,000, okay? I have already talked to First Southwest and asked them what it would be. They mock up what a bond issuance would be if it was done today for these types of, and they give us the years and how long they think they ought to be, okay? And then they say this would be a payment according to the last things that we have. By the way, this bond issuance I think is up around 3 is the last one we did. It's 3 and some change, I think it is. So they mock up, this is what it would cost. So if we were gonna put 5 years in, let's say, on the vestibules, okay, we'd need $27,400 set aside into the capital stabilization account. The radio system upgrade would need $30,000 into the capital stabilization account. One of the things that I think that we wanna talk about too here, that I think it's the job of the board to try to get across to everyone. There is a misconception out there when we go to a town meeting and we say, we're gonna do $1 million worth of bond issuances, okay? And then we come to Article 3 and we put $700,000 in there and they say, oh, we did $1.7 million worth of bond. We're not. We're putting the money aside before we actually go out and bond those things, and that would be your 5 years. So in this particular case, we would need, assuming you did all of them, I'm not, saying that that's what we're doing, you would need $727,000 put into the capital stabilization to fund all these things in addition to the free cash, the direct free cash payments for the next 5 years. That would be if you were going to bond on that, okay? Now, is this chiseled in stone? Like Moses here, where you came up? Of course not, okay? If for some reason somebody said, geez, I'd really like to take the 49 and do the Office 365 migration and bond it, I mean, we can do that. This is my thumbnail, okay? And I think this is what we've been doing for the last several years, okay? So, having said that, you have two specific places here, free cash and bond in capital payment. So having now moving forward, I would probably tell you this, I mean, you're gonna have to, obviously, we're gonna have to go through, okay, here's number one, is this, I don't even know what this one is, $20,000 for the, school zone signal flashes, okay? We're gonna have to go through all those and say, is this what we wanna do? And is this what we wanna pay for? Now, from a standpoint of the free cash, now I'm gonna go from giving you information to now giving you, from my perspective as a member of your board, an opinion, okay? This does not mean that the six of you need to follow my opinion. I'm gonna give you what I believe, and from there. I don't have, at this moment, a particular problem with any one. And when I'm saying this, I'm not saying this is a good project, this is not a good project. Funding wise, if we were talking about the straight up free cash moves, putting them onto the budget, okay, you don't run too much of a risk, okay, because if you get the money and you put it in there, it's a one-time payment, and you either got it or you didn't get it. And it's over with if it doesn't work. As far as the bonding goes, from where I sit at this particular moment, I am personally not going to vote for another bond issuance here for anything. The problem we have is, as I've made up to all of you guys, okay, or told to you, is we have created a pattern and a project called the Capital Stabilization Fund, which has been a success, all right? And it is working, and it will continue to work as long as we're doing what we're doing. However, for the last 2 to 3 years, we've fallen into a situation where we can no longer walk into a town meeting and say, the money that we're putting aside for these particular items is going to beat it. It's an up in the air run, okay? And quite frankly, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. And, I mean, it's almost ludicrous to say we have a system here in which we are going to fulfill, and if you look on here, a number of departments are here. Pretty much the whole town. If we look around at what's been done here, and I am looking, I've seen Brian here, he's one of the bigger people in this, okay? I'm not taking away from the chiefs with their automobiles and what have you, but Brian has done a lot of physical repairs to a number of buildings, and it's visible to everyone. John has done a number of physical repairs, the DPW director, Mr. Haynes, has done a number of physical repairs to roads that are obvious to everyone. You see new buildings, you see painted buildings, you see restored buildings, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a success. But it is the height of being ludicrous to say, while we are funding these accounts over here, we'd like to sweep right back around and take the money that we're using to pay for these items and take it out of the account. Under that situation, I don't see doing any bond issuance. Today, if we stop, and assuming that that's left alone, and the town has the fortitude to at least keep with what they've done for the last few years and keep raising and appropriating, you're not in any trouble. The taxpayers aren't in any trouble. They will continue on, in this account, as it was set up to do, will pay for the things that we've bought. And it'll pay for them within the confines of Proposition 2.5 by law. Adding a whole bunch more on there while we're raiding the funds out and destroying the free cash, I'm not for it. Now, I mean, that's my opinion. You guys are 6 people, you guys can vote where you want. I won't be, unless something radically changes. So I'll let you guys start asking questions and do what you want from there.
First of all, you're a voting member of the committee, George. So
No, I
you're
understand,
not
but
just
I'm.
advising us. I mean, you're
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying, but I'm not, I'm also not gonna say, you have no right to do, you can vote however you
Oh, right,
like.
right.
But what I'm trying to tell you is that I wanna venture from, I'm giving you information
Right.
and telling you to where I'm gonna go,
Yeah.
but not, well, this is chiseled in stone. If you guys prefer to move forward, you have every right to do that. But I don't see it.
George, on the Moody's report,
Yes,
right on the beginning summary, it says the town's debt and unfunded pension burdens are substantial.
yes.
When does that stop playing into effect?
What well, the debt, let's talk about that. That was the same thing that we just said. We have a higher than average debt service, okay, out there. And the only thing that's offsetting it is the fact that we're offsetting it with our capital stabilization fund. When they talk about the unfunded pension liability, they are talking about the, what the heck is the name of it? PERAC. Post-employment, I hate these acronyms.
That's not the Plymouth County.
That's the Plymouth County, all right?
Pension plan, yeah.
It's the pension plan. Essentially, it goes like this. Every city and town in the state of Massachusetts, and I'm not even so sure it isn't even across the whole country, it's supposed to be OPEC, that's what it is, other post-employment. No. I gotta look at the title for it. I can't stand acronyms, it's as simple as that. But essentially what they're telling you is this. If you look at the Social Security system, right, we all know it's trashed, right? What's the only way it's surviving right at this particular moment is the people who are actually on Social Security, okay, are being paid by the people who are working. That's what it's almost like what used to be called a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid plan, okay? The guys on the bottom are doing the payments for the guys on the top. Why? Because the funds were all rated out of it and it was never self-sustaining right from the day one, okay? You've got people in there who shouldn't have been on there in the first place that never paid a dime into it picking up on Social Security. Fine. Now you come to the, like Plymouth County or county retirements or what have you. They're a little better than the Social Security system, meaning they've done a better job at keeping the money in there. However, they've not been fully funded, all right? From where I sit, okay, now I'm into the opinion area again. As an accountant, I fully believe that the fund should be fully funded. Meaning that if everybody went out on the same day, they have enough money in there to pay for it. Now, is that gonna happen? Probably not. But that's the way it should be funded. The argument that I would have coming back the other way is the state, the feds, and everybody allowed this to go on for 60, 70 years more, whatever it is since its inception. Now they come back and tell you, hey, East Bridgewater, you owe us $30 million, okay? Now, if that sounds like a lot of money, it is, but it's not also, that's not just East Bridgewater. Bridgewater owes $30 million. Whitman owes 30 some odd million dollars.
So here it's saying it is our debt.
It is. They're claiming it's now. As far as I know, and I haven't done a study on this, okay, there's only one place that I've heard of, and I think that there's been a few now that are jumping into it. All right, I believe, and dare I say the word, Newton Wellesley, okay, went out and they did their own bond issuance for some 35, 40 million bucks, and they fully funded the debt. Okay, but of course, when you go to Newton Wellesley, everybody's making $250,000 to $500,000 a year, and they couldn't care less. All right, so they fully funded their debt. To fully fund the East Bridgewater debt, according to these particular rules, we need 30 million bucks. So far, I've managed to get in a whopping $50,000 over the last 5-6 years. Accordingly, as Moody's keeps talking about, as time goes on, next year, year after, they're going to start dunning towns and say, okay, you haven't done anything here. And given what we're seeing, right now, they're seeing me put $10,000 in there. Okay, they're making an attempt. You give it another couple of years and we can talk, we could have like the auditors come in, and then they're gonna say, you haven't done anything, you're at risk, okay? You have this $30 million debt. And, I mean, again, this isn't just us, this is everybody. But it's going to be a challenge to get that money, especially since one of the things will circle around again. What do they say? In here, you have no more room in your Proposition 2.5, so we can't say, well, let's just go up, another couple $100,000 and we'll go throw it into that pot every year. No, we're already spending right up to where we can spend at this particular moment. This is going to be a challenge over the next few years. And yeah, that is an issue. So the debt itself is being offset by what we're doing here, okay, with the capital. But the post-employment, it's like picking your teeth right at the moment. We haven't done a hell of a lot of anything with it.
So the reality is, if we do have to stop paying at some point, our free cash is gonna be affected quite a bit by that as well.
Well, I mean, again, if you were taking a certain amount of free cash and putting it aside, because it's not really a spending account, it's mostly an account to offset, saying you have to have this money there in case everybody left on the same day.
But now, assuming that, excuse me, assuming that Moody's had done the thorough evaluation, they had taken into account the kind of one-time events that we talked about, the sale of land, when they formulated their bond rating for the town. Is there a time frame on that where we look, 2-3 years in the future, that incorporates what our bond rating is relative to what our financial health is?
Each time that we come out to do a bond issuance, so let's say we're doing one based on what we want, let's say this. If we're doing it within the next year, we'll have to go through the same process all over again. This disclosure, they'll have to look at where we are. Now,
Right, but they look and say, hey, there's no more land to sell.
there's no more land or whatever.
They can
But
make that accommodation
right.
in their calculation.
But they're not even gonna go down and, let's say, drill down and say, where is your free cash? They're just gonna look at the free cash and say, wait a minute, last year you had 1.3,
So
this year you got 8.
they don't look at how free cash is
No, they just wanna see,
accumulated.
yeah, they
They just
probably
look at the
do,
number,
but
they
they
don't look
just.
at where it's coming from
Yeah.
and see if it's sustainable or not.
Right, no, I don't believe so, that was not one of the questions that they were asking.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they do, and maybe they do get deep into it, but I think
Anyone
what
else
they
have
do.
any- I mean, there are more financially minded people here than I am.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, that
Right.
when people do these bond ratings, do they
Right.
take a look and say, hey, this is a one-time event? Because I just know from my financial statement analysis days that we do look and say, hey, is this a one-time event or is it a long time?
I don't know how deeply they go into what made up that free cash, okay? All I think that they're doing is saying, you had this amount of free cash, how much of it did you put towards the budget? Or how much of it did you put towards?
So they don't look where it came from. They just-
I don't believe so, because if it's sustained and it keeps going on year after year after year, then they say, well, there's a back.
There's a string, right?
Right, there's a string. On the other hand, if they see it 1,800,000, 600, 400,
But we're saying we've had a stream of one-time events. and
Yes,
that
that
stream
have
of
kept it
one-time
going,
events is
right.
coming to an end.
Right, exactly.
Is that a fair?
Exactly, yeah, that's
The
exactly.
known ones, I mean, you never know.
No, I mean, look, there
We
is
we
one.
didn't predict all those.
Right.
Like the 4 or 5 years in a row, we didn't know they were coming.
No, I
So
mean,
things
and you
pop
don't
up.
know what's
So you
around the
budget a
corner.
little bit conservatively.
Right.
You know what I mean? To
And
get
you
that
leave
profit.
that opening, right.
Right.
And that's what we did. Initially in the 1990s, what had happened was, like I told you, and I mean, and I'm not kidding with that. I mean, essentially we just said, well, I want to really spend $2.5 million, but I only got 2 coming in, so I'll just make believe that we're getting $2.5 million in. What did? We reversed it and said, we think we're going to get 2 million in, but we're only going to spend 1.8.
Right.
Okay, so then, so now you left that little bit of a thing, and that was turning over and becoming your free cash.
Right.
So, any other questions that I can maybe answer for you? All right. then you guys, I mean, I know you got a couple guys here, so I'll sit in, I mean, I've gotten till late anyway.
You
so.
gotta take off.
I can give you 10 minutes,
Okay.
and I don't wanna,
Okay.
I'll be happy to come back, reschedule if you want.
What do you think? What are you looking at this year? Couple stuff for the school?
I've only really submitted one thing, and that's for a handicap ramp at the middle school,
Okay.
to replace a wheelchair lift that was decommissioned by the state elevator commission, and actually was taken
Synopsis?
out of service. It was removed last week,
Oh, it was?
yes.
Wow.
Just that alone, just the removal and decommissioning with the state, was a little over $6,000.
Wow.
But to replace it would probably be 40,
Yeah.
and you have to get 3 variances from the state elevator board to replace an elevator, a wheelchair lift, just like we had to do at the central school. And it's only going, it's on the backside of the school, and it's only going up 4 steps, and there's room to put a ramp in.
Okay.
You put a ramp in, once, done.
Okay. So that's for 35, right?
I thought it was 35, 31, around there, yeah.
31,750.
Yeah,
Okay.
use the synopsis page here, guys, it'll show you where it is.
Well, yeah, for 35.
Yeah, the wheelchair ramp, 35.
The other one I passed on to the Board of Selectmen, and that was for the sign for the front of the town hall,
Yeah.
electronic sign. Right now, we have no signage out there,
Right.
and no way for the tax collector to advertise, or the town clerk to advertise. And everything out front is kinda done, it was like the last piece to put out there.
Okay. I think we passed that last year.
Yes,
Is that back on?
I gave it to the board to put in.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And they originally requested it,
Oh, okay.
so. Those are the only 2 things I really put in this year.
Okay. All right. Any questions about the ramp? For Brian? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Turnaround time, like once funding gets approval, how long?
I would like to get it done this summer,
Right.
depending on contractors. I mean,
Yeah,
construction fields are busy right now.
sure.
Were there any threat of fines or violations?
No. No, as long as we're actively
Right.
doing something, no.
Brian, what about the schools for like the central school roof, the interior, all the projects? You looked at all that?
The assessments for all of that have been completed.
Yeah, yeah, those, yeah, we got the packets and all that.
Yeah.
I'll be drafting
A
a,
roof right now. so we
well,
don't know where the wind
I'll be
blows.
drafting an email a memo in regards to those assessments, because a decision needs to be made which ways they're gonna go. But I wanted you guys to have all that information and look through it. But please understand that, that's not a renovation like, we've all done renovations in our home, and we renovated our kitchen, and we got beautiful new cabinets and countertops and flooring. That's not the type of renovation there. It's mechanical renovations, it's bringing things up to code. It's stuff that the public's really not gonna see. They're still gonna walk into a classroom from 1951.
Right.
It's not gonna be, new windows and drapes and stuff, so there's a difference there between what some people vision as a renovation
Right,
and what those assessments look at.
that's true. Yeah. Any chance of getting grant money for these projects? I know we talked about that.
For the school projects?
Yeah.
We actually have a statement of interest in, for the roof right now, for an accelerated repairs project through the MSBA.
Right.
That decision, I believe, is made in June, but there's no guarantee.
Right. What do you think, gut
And
feeling?
each one of those, as they're listed on that assessment, would be an individual project with the MSBA,
Right.
separately submitted.
Mhm.
And you still have to fully bond it on the town side, because the MSBA requires, just like the boiler project, if it's 1.5, you have to be authorized to borrow at 1.5.
Right.
So each one of them requires a town vote to fund it.
Then hope we get the money.
And there's no guarantee that we're gonna get a 56% reimbursement rate from the MSBA on any one of those.
But if we don't get the award, we're still, the town is still committed to moving forward with the project through. the
That's a
bond.
decision that the powers that be would have to make.
So they wanna see that we've skin in the game, that we really want it.
Right. It's fun. It's a big difference, though.
It really is.
You know, you commit to this, and if the funding doesn't go through, that's,
But you don't
these
commit
are
to it
big
unless
nuts,
you
right?
really,
They're
really
big
want it.
items. Huh?
I said, you don't commit to it unless you really, really
Right.
want it.
Right.
That's what they're looking for, I think.
And just to let you know that I do have another proposal for a further assessment, to assess our options.
Okay.
Whether we upgrade, mechanically renovate that school and bring it up to code, additions to other buildings to house those students, or a new school. And what those three options would entail.
That's good.
Well, the funding for that, I have the funding for that, I just haven't been authorized to do it yet.
Okay. How much is that assessment?
21,000.
And is that authorized for the Board of Selectmen? Or who authorizes the release of the 21,000?
I'll speak to the superintendent.
I should probably know that, but,
I'll speak to the superintendent about it.
okay.
Sounds like it might be worthwhile.
Because we can have all that assessment information, there's a ton of information in there, but there's other options that we need to consider. People are gonna ask, oh, why don't you do this, or why didn't you do that?
Right.
So here it all is, option A, B, and C,
Triage.
and which one was cost effective, and,
Okay.
Which one can we afford, you know?
yeah.
What's the town wanna do?
And Brian and I have had some long in-depth conversations about this, and when you start to look at the total cost, when you package the assessments together, and what Brian was relating to, you're exceeding $20 million in repairs. That's what moves us into this next phase of the conversation, I'm thinking, you need to have all the information in front of you before you start to make any of these additional.
Well, that's exactly why we wanted the assessment before we start investing in the boiler, the roof, we agree 100% with it. We'd like to get
But
everything.
do we wanna
We
spend,
don't wanna start chasing good money after bad.
if we
and it's
spend
all- we're not-
18 or $20 million renovating, that's gonna take 8 to 10 years. Because most of that is summer project work. You have a 6 to 8 week window to get something done. It's gonna be very disruptive to that building. There's still programs going on there in the summer, which can be moved, but all said and done, you still have a building that's 1951 and 1961. You
Which-
take that 20 million and invest it somewhere else,
Which leads you to that phase. So when you get into that phase, making the decision as to what you want to do, you have to understand one thing. Even if with a 50% reimbursement from the MSBA, okay? If it's a $20 million project, then you're talking a $10 million debt exclusion override. Because we can't do it out of the,
Oh, right.
there's just not enough money. So that has to be taken into account, that you're gonna have to override for a debt exclusion.
Yeah. Same with these repairs.
Oh, well,
18 to 20 million of repairs are not gonna be funded through the,
no, I mean, unless you're doing it like he said, year by year by year, and it's gonna take
200
forever.
there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not,
Not 10 million, not 20
here.
million, no, I mean, you're gonna need, you'll, sooner or later, you're gonna get caught up with
Right.
it, and it's just
Or
too
it's gonna
much.
take the whole fund away, there'll
Right.
just be that one thing,
Right.
so.
Right, and then you get into opportunity costs, what else
Right.
would we be doing?
Well, then the roads go away and all these other
Yeah,
projects that we're
exactly,
connected
right.
to, right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
nice school, but you can't drive down the road to get
You
there.
can't get there, right?
We'll do anything else, right? We can't plow the, to drive the road, so. Okay. Right, great. It's fine, let's do it.
I'll be happy to come back if you need
Okay.
any more information.
Yeah, we will do that.
Shoot me an email or whatever.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on short notice.
No
too.
problem.
Appreciate it. Hey, John,
Good evening.
how we doing?
Hope everybody brought their packets, I'm trying to move to it, so take a look ideally.
Yeah, I wish we could work on Google Drive ourselves.
I have my computer in the car.
Not to mention, I think with inside the package is that assessment, is
Yes,
in
we
there.
have all the assessments.
Okay, you do have that, all right, so.
So George, can we work, on a side note, work with the IT guy and get the capital planning committee, Google Drive set up? We need to get a
The DPW
Google
package that
Drive,
was
you know,
submitted.
that we can store all of our
Emails.
stuff on.
I
Get
can,
emails.
I can, talk to him about that, I'll bring him in and.
Yeah, and we need, you know, access to the wireless network, so we can, you know, the laptops got shot down at the meeting,
Yes.
so we have to bring our own in, but we need
Something that
Google
you
Drive,
can connect to.
we need
to
the
the-
wireless access,
Yes.
you know, at least we
Yeah.
can, like right now, we just jump on.
Yeah, I
So that's
understand.
all
I got it.
loaded and, you know what I mean, so we can do away with all this.
I'm sure he can do that, yeah.
And then going forward, you know, Rebecca and those guys can just load a ton of capital stuff on there, organize the files, so we can just get all the
Yeah.
stuff that you're doing, boom,
Yeah.
it's right here, it's right
Yeah.
there, so it'll be a little more efficient, you know?
The street sweeper. Yeah. I,
So I think what George did here, you must have broken these packets into things that were bonded, things that you were gonna do in free cash.
Well, no, I mean, they're all, each package has its own, thing, like I see your street sweeper, so it's one package all by itself with all the backup, okay?
So here's Public Works, will be right there.
Yeah.
That's what we're deciding.
I mean, you have them.
3 articles.
Okay, three, we got them all, yeah.
signage, street sweeper, and repairs.
For those, yeah.
So again, the first project we're proposing, George mentioned it earlier in his discussion, we're looking to replace the existing school Sedona flashing, 4 flashing units that are on Central Street, as you approach each of the middle school and central school. Those are all over 30 years old. They becoming obsolete. The equipment is no longer readily available to make repairs. We've had a number of issues with them. And because of their age, they're not something you can just go to the local electrical store and get the switch relay or things like that. So we're proposing upgrading those. We'd upgrade those to LED, possibly even solar option. We've spoken with the police department as well about if the dollars allowed, it would, to be able to put in the, things you've probably seen around town, the mini radars. They're they flash when you exceed the speed limit in the area.
Yeah.
In discussions about what that would add to this project as a cost. So that's one project we're submitting. I've attached a quote from Bell Traffic Signal Company. You can see individually, we broke it out into sections, if we were just to replace the heads or replace the poles, but for the purpose of the project, I submitted it as 4 entire new setups furnished and installed.
Yeah, one of the questions I had about this too, and don't feel the need to do a deep dive on it, but, what's the bidding process like? How many companies do you go to see?
With this would fall under their procurement thresholds of less than $50,000. We get 3 quotes for it from area, but really there's only 2 companies in the area that would bid on this anyway. Bell Traffic is who I got this quote from. They're a company we already have a contract in place with for a signal and service repair, so I just called them and asked them to put, obviously going forward. Yeah, we'd have to,
John, don't they also appear on the state bid list too?
Right.
I think Bell Traffic's on there anyway. so-
they're
Yeah, this,
Yeah, I'm sure they're all qualified, I just like to ask the
yeah,
question.
the strict procurement rules that they all have to follow,
Yeah.
you know, for the number of quotes, the dollar amounts, and then state,
In some things, it's just best management, you just wanna keep everybody honest, you don't want anybody to think they're the only game in town.
Right.
But Bell's Traffic has been excellent for the time they've worked with, it, very responsive
Right, fantastic.
to our needs, which have been significant.
any questions on the lights? All right, let's go.
Next would be the, again, for the 4th year in a row, I'm presenting the need to replace our street sweeper. The current street sweeper is a 1997. And it's, for the last 4 years, it's escalating about 8 to 11% per year in cost.
And how much have you paid in repairs over the 40s, do you know, offhand?
We were looking at,
Okay, you had it.
total repairs for parts only, because our own mechanics are capable of doing it. In 2017, 2016, 2015, we spent over $4,400 on it. We've got over 216 man-hours into it, so if you were to think of that at shop labor rates, you know, 85 plus dollars per hour. That doesn't include the time that the unit's actually down, and we're not actually out there being used. We've replaced, and there's a number of things that are upcoming. Main broom cylinder, drivetrain sprocket, conveyor belt, roller, lower roller scraper, belt scraper, tower brackets, significant repair to the frame and cab structure. It's just, the environment it lives in, it's wet, gritty, dusty, dirty all the time. It rots. You know, I think if you were to go out, you'd see that most towns have these on a 10 to 12 year replacement cycle. This is again a 97. So,
Then again, look at the opportunity cost, what else can we do with $200 of labor?
Right.
Uh,
I know the last few years, you know, we're a little bit tight on some other projects, so we kept kicking Johns down the road.
Yeah,
and we've looked at some different funding methodologies. This is the, you know, I think last year I proposed the option to, you know, again, we're limited in funding to do a municipal lease.
Right.
There's different options that would break that into a 3 or 5 year payment plan, whatever it be. It's really, I can't stress enough, it's an essential item for a highway department to own. It's not, you know, one of these things that you really can have on an on-call basis. We've gotten pricing about, well, what if we contracted it out? What if we would have, you know, well, the last time we did that, I think we came up with a figure of about $48,000 to sweep the town once. You know, we've got, that'd be about 160 lane miles, and so now within 4 or 5 years, we'd be able to apply for them.
So
So
you sweep every road?
every road gets swept, and actually we're moving with the new municipal stormwater permit that we're under. They're actually, they want us to move to a semi-annual sweeping program to try and get the contaminants and things off the road, so it doesn't get into the catch basin, which then leads into your storm drains and into your outfalls and your sensitive wetland areas. So there's really, the other thing we're using, you know, all these, you know, an increase in civic activities, which is great, but, you know, before every road race, we sweep the route. Before every parade, we sweep the route. Before, we use it a lot for just general leaf and litter cleanup in the fall. Again, more, not only for aesthetics value of picking up the leaves, but that's stormwater management now too, because you gotta get all that stuff so it doesn't end up in your storm drain and culverts and cut backups.
Even if we replace with a new one, John, would you continue to use the second machine? Or would you get rid of it?
I wouldn't
Some of the dirty
want
jobs.
it, I wouldn't want, well, it has virtually no trade-in value.
Right. So
Well, that's what I was
use it.
wondering,
to
why
that
would
point.
you, why would maybe use it?
So I might hold on to it. We're, as you guys all know, we are very limited on our storage.
Right.
So we don't have excess space to keep it. If we, you know, would certainly have to be stored outside, which is fine. But I would keep it until the point that it needed a significant investment in repair again.
Well, that being said, if we buy a new one, where are you putting it?
Oh, that would stay inside.
That would go inside?
Yeah, it would actually, and we would move it from where the street sweeper is now traditionally stored in the highway section. It would actually, we'd have to rearrange some things so that it could be stored up in the water and land management division,
Right.
which is
Behind.
at least a dry
little
facility
drier.
that doesn't flood on a regular basis.
I would just think the value would be worth it to keep the one,
Yeah.
the old one,
Yeah,
for, you know, secondary work.
Right.
and more than likely to, because there's virtually no trade-in value. I mean, it's,
Nobody wants it.
No.
yeah, you look at it, you're
Scrap.
talking about replacing a $250,000 machine, and you can find them on eBay for, you know, $4,400.
Yeah.
Because the companies won't take in trade, anything like mine in trade, you know, a 2008, a 2010. You know,
Maybe,
there
yeah.
are people who will take those in trade and then go through them and refurbish them and stuff, but they don't want the headaches involved.
I would think it would be to our benefit to run
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
We,
Until it dies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're.
Not gonna get nothing for it anyway.
right,
Right.
and that, we do that with a number of things, you know, we replaced our brush chipper,
Yeah, we kept
which
the
was in
old one.
1995, we kept the old one.
Yeah.
We can utilize that in the wintertime, we can run 2 crews, it's really good when we have storm events, things like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's no longer a frontline piece of equipment, but we hold on to it and,
No, but this kind of weather, might be busy
Yeah.
next week. All the limbs everywhere.
I think we've talked about it too, you've never really found a way that the enterprise fund could kick in to that.
no, it's difficult to relate the street sweeper to
Water
water, except the fact that
piping.
we fill it with water to
Yeah.
run it, but.
That's a real reach.
Yeah, I don't think you pass the auditors.
Yeah, you know.
Well, it is part of stormwater management.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, no,
Gotta-
well,
does
it is.
have
Think
a-
outside the
They
box, I
won't
like
know
it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they'd bite on that. Maybe in future years, depending on solid waste
Could have
management.
set it up with the truck to do monitor everybody's water meter with it at the same time.
You could, I mean, that's simple. I mean, that,
Well, now it's
That's
part of
easy,
the,
that's the-
now it's part of the water.
yeah, that's the radio. Yeah.
Put it on the sweeper.
That's the thinking right there.
I like that.
So any questions on the sweeper?
I
Just
think
feel
it's-
benefit, Dan, we,
probably
yeah, I
been
think it's the
long
4th
overdue.
year John has come with it.
Yeah.
We've been, no, trying to push it down because it's such a big
Yeah,
item.
that stuff's expensive.
Yeah.
It's
And,
big
you
and
know,
expensive.
plus we committed to a significant investment in the roads, so John has come back, I think this is, what, year 5 or 6 with the
Year
roads?
5, I believe.
He gave like a 10-year plan where we can get all the roads up to a point where when John says the useful life of a road is 20 years, it's not 30 and 35 like it used to be. It's 20, you know what I mean? And then he's doing, the maintenance needs to be done at 20, so he minimized the reconstruction or the repaving cost. I think the old way, we just let the roads disintegrate and then you're paying huge money to fix, a mile of the road.
What you'll actually begin to see, that's the next item, is 2019 proposed pavement preservation or infrastructure management plan.
John, just as a point of information too, before you go in it, I believe, haven't we done something like, you've been taking the chapter 90 and combining it with what we've been doing here, and the net result was what, 7 million or so we've done in road
well
repairs?
over 10 million.
10, okay.
Because with that, we've also, to Chris's point about utilizing the enterprise fund, when we do
Right.
water main
Water
repairs
mains,
and
right.
water main upgrades and things, we're actually, because of the impact that typically has on a road, we're using the water enterprise funds to offset the cost of resurfacing
Right.
and repaving the roadways afterwards. So when you start to put all that together, we're upwards of over $10 million with investment we've made in
Right.
public ways.
All of which has been done within the Proposition 2.5
Right.
thing through, like you say, a little creativity on your side, but, and then a chunk from your capital stabilization.
Yeah, no, and I preach this to other towns, because even you allude to Newton and Wellesley and things like that. Well, towns like Duxbury and Dover, they get no town funding.
Right.
All of their road pavement, all their road maintenance is literally from Chapter
Chapter
90
90.
dollars.
Really?
Yeah.
They listen to the programs that we have, and they're awestruck by
Wow.
the fact of what we're able to do. I mean, and the credit, not only the credit for what we're doing on our roadway system, but the fact that we can also now utilize our public works employees to do work on all the other areas that they never used to work on before. The work they do on, all of our public grounds, our school grounds, our green, it's the same 9 guys we had. We don't have more guys, we just have way better roads. So instead of having to have, 6 guys out patching potholes every day, I can send a crew of 3 or 4, and they're now doing grounds maintenance and, and things like that, and they've taken on, we've been able to venture into areas that without the capital plan and capital investment in our roadway, we wouldn't be able to do these other things. And I think that's what people need to understand too. The other things you see DPW doing are a direct result of the fact that we don't have, 3 crews of guys out every single day just filling potholes over and over and over again. And everyone can feel a lot better about that, I think, from the taxpayers who see the work being done to the guys actually doing the work. So it's been a huge success.
Yeah, everyone's appreciative of that. you know?
Amen.
But then to what you spoke about, so the streets we're proposing this year, now, we're actually at a point where our main roads are in good shape. We're actually now getting into subdivisions.
Right.
Subdivisions that for 40, 50 years have never seen anything done to them.
Right.
So we're able to move into those. We'll finished up Cheryl, Brendel, Laurie Lane, those roads last year, we did those. Now we're working in Anna Drive, Kenilworth, we did Broad Meadow, we did, you know, a lot of roads like that, subdivisions that were built in the sixties and seventies that have had nothing.
Are you into any of the subdivisions that weren't accepted?
Broad Meadow had a section that wasn't accepted. We're moving more towards that. If you look at like our 2020, 2021 plan, I have those like Rolling Hills is an area that
Are you at least able to get into the bond monies that
we're yep, so actually one of the roads we're doing right now, Johnson Farm Road off of Natalie Drive is bond money. We've actually, that money was seized last summer, we went in and took, the road was essentially, it was wasted. It was gonna cost more to go in there and fix the bad spots and try to level it, pay, and make everything match. We went in, we ground up the whole road, started right fresh, because, and we're utilizing that direct bond money that was seized.
John, I think there's something that needs to be said, just for the sake of the people who are watching it, maybe some of the guys in here. He keeps saying bond money, and I'm talking bond. There's two different types of bonds here. There's the bond that we go out to sell bonds on behalf of the municipality. The bond right now he's talking about is when somebody puts in a subdivision, a certain amount of money is withheld. So they might say that subdivision's $1 million or whatever it is. We're holding back 100,000, okay, in the event that you don't finish off what you're doing here. So it's basically, it's a bond, but it isn't the same kind of a bond that we're talking about here. This
So
is a
what
bond.
we're doing is
Yeah.
utilizing that performance bond
Right.
that's put up against the project.
Right,
When a developer, for lack of performance, they lose that bond, the town retains it. We can then claim the funds to finish the project.
right.
So we're using those funds.
Is there any legal cost in doing that?
It all
Does anyone
goes,
challenge those?
no.
It's usually
for the
from
planning board, I
non-conforming.
mean,
If you have
it's,
to like, what do you do
well-
for backup before you seize it? I mean,
It goes through a process, it goes through a legal review and this and that, but all those charges are charged back against the performance bond. So it's a win-win for the town to go out, and then what we
Just real quick, are they charged against the bond itself, so it's $100,000, is it?
they'll take it directly
Legal
from
fees.
Does
the,
it go to $90,000?
Yeah.
But quite frankly, most of the time when they walk away from the bond, it's gonna cost more to finish the job.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So
I
it's a
just-
losing proposition to the
Right.
town.
But at the same time, we have to make sure
So
all the i's are
hopefully,
dotted
like,
and t's
you
are
know,
crossed.
I don't know,
before
but
we
I'm sure the planning board, they have a different procedure, I would hope.
No, but I wanted
Continue
to
that.
stress the idea that when he's saying bond, we
Right.
can't do a bonding on a
Not a borrowing.
non-accepted
We're not talking about high
road,
yield
you
municipal
know?
bonds.
and you
So this
never-
is a bond
you
that
never
was
want
somebody
the
else's money,
contractor to
you know?
walk away from the project,
Right.
because it does leave the town, more the residents who actually live on that street
Yeah.
in a difficult situation. But what we do benefit from is our procurement strength. And because of the way that we're procuring, you know, we're doing 10,000 tons of paving a year now. Well, our price to put pavement down
It's cheaper.
is significantly less than it costs the average developer to go in and put pavement. So we're using those,
I mean, a lot of them are old, I imagine they're 20, 30-year-old.
yeah, there's streets, well, Rolling Hills, that's the next one we really need to tackle. But Rolling Hills,
On that.
the thing you don't
But I
think
would
about,
encourage it.
there's over a mile of pavement in there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
right.
They're huge.
Yeah.
You know, these are huge.
Well, they watered Rolling Hills, so. They're rolling.
But, and again, so that's where we end up putting a lot of our
Right.
resources right
Right.
now, day to day, is guys in there patching potholes until we can work, and we've met several times with the planning board over the last few years, the town clerk, their inspectors, to try and get these roads accepted, because the other thing, when we don't have these roads accepted, we're not
Yeah,
receiving
you're not
chapter
getting
90
state
dollars.
mileage on them.
So, we have about 86 miles of public way, but only 64 miles of that's actually accepted. So we have all of the things in place, but they need to, you know, next really it starts with like the town clerk being able to get those on town meetings so the voters can accept them. So
John, what's the surface treatment?
surface treatments are a lot of what you're seeing, we're moving towards, and that goes towards what we're talking about, preserving the roads we've made the significant investment in. So one of the roads
Bridge Street.
right here is West Union Street. West Union Street was the first road I ever did when I took over as highway surveyor, in 2003. So now, 15 years, 16 years later, that road is at a point where it's still in decent shape, but it needs to have the surface preserved. So essentially, I talk to people, it's like keeping paint on your house. If you keep paint on your house will last a long, long time. If we can keep the surface, the actual part that gets the wear, the tear,
So right now, the base is still fine, all you need to do is just scrape off
Exactly.
a couple inches or whatever it was.
So surface treatments, we're doing at a cost between like $5 and $7 a square yard, versus when we have to go in and do a process like we had to do on Oak Street last year, where we come in and we mill the road off and level it and repave it, we're more like $17 a square yard. When we get to a process like we just talked about like Anna Drive, or just like that, we actually literally go in and grind the road up and regrade it and have to put down 4 inches of new pavement, you're at $23, $25 a square yard. So to do the pavement preservation, it makes so much sense to manage the investment that the town has made.
That's the point where we want to get at.
And as we move, that's what you'll
In
see.
the old days, we would just let it deteriorate until, you know, the whole thing is.
Right. And it's an ongoing process, so to say we'll never need dollars to keep that up
Oh, right.
is unrealistic, but the dollars we spend will go so much farther.
Is that gonna be a chip seal, or what are you doing?
More than likely, we've had really good luck with that. It's a rubber chip seal, a latex, 20% latex-based rubber chip seal. It's a little more abrasive to the average, you know, than nice smooth highway pavement, but communities that have done this, I was hesitant to do it at first, but I've been watching communities that have now had this in place 5, 7, 8 years. Town of Mansfield, Foxborough, communities that get a lot of road traffic, have roads that they're showing me that are, you know, 7, 8 years out that are still
Nice and tight.
really, look really sound.
Wow.
And again, that's a process that said and done costs us $5 a square yard. So it looks a little abrasive, literally, you know, rough at first, but a year, 2 years out, it levels out the traffic, moves it, any free stone gets scraped off. Again, that's another place we run the sweeper out right afterwards, we sweep it up. Actually, this year we did Central Street, a section of Central Street and all of Crescent Street. We had that freak kind of snowstorm in Veterans Day, where we thought we were supposed to get a ½ inch on the grass, and we ended up with 5 inches on the road, and we're plowing at 10 o'clock at night. Well, we went out and actually swept Central Street and Crescent Street the week after, just to get any loose stone that came up when we scraped it off. I'm very impressed with the product.
Yeah, does it hold up against plowing?
Well,
It will.
I'm
Washington Street gonna get any more pavement where it's falling apart again?
So the funds that were allocated to continue, Washington Street's our longest street in town. It's gonna have to be paved in sections, it's more, otherwise, you know, I'll come here and I'll say, I need $1.5 million to pave Washington Street. It's not gonna happen. Honestly, the funds that I had, so I kind of, in my game plan, appropriated, you know, $100,000 to $125,000 a year for the sections of Washington Street. This year, I'm utilizing those dollars to, the realignment project at Route 106 in Washington Street. So, that's the year I'm gonna move the dollars that are gonna keep us,
It's still part of Washington Street.
it's still part of Washington
Yeah,
Street,
yeah.
yep. So the-
Safety is important, so that's the number one.
that's a priority for a number of reasons for all of us. I'm always somewhat hesitant to put out publicly the streets that we say are gonna get done, because to George's point, that, you know, again, this is,
That's right.
this article is probably the biggest article that gets bonded every year, with the exception of some of the, you know, the, kind of the central school roof project that's a big one. Obviously, if that's the decision, the direction that the town moves, then this work doesn't get done. That's what I, you know. And that will then have further ramifications, because that means that we'll have to, at the end of the day, the highway department, public works department, our priority, our responsibility, first and foremost, is to maintain the public way. All the other things we do, which we all take a lot of pride in, we all appreciate and the residents appreciate, are extra. So when these things happen, if that were to happen, that means there's no investment made into these roadways. They'll need more day-to-day maintenance, which means those crews that are working other places now go to day-to-day maintenance back on the roads. Obviously, from a department head standpoint, that would be, you know, hugely damaging to our program. From a resident standpoint, it would be depressing to see that happen, because I do think if you look at the town of East Bridgewater over the last 10 years, what people talk about are the investments we made in buildings and, you know, the investment in our roads and our public spaces. I think people see that everywhere.
People see the capital improvements, but they also see the capital stabilization fund as a piggy bank, so we gotta be careful with that. I think that's the dilemma that we're facing from this committee, to George's point, you know, do you commit to these long-term bonding when that money's sitting there that can be kind of rated and prevents us from making these payments later, and could put us in a bind, so, you know, what's a responsible thing to do, you know? What we wanna do is keep funding these kind of projects, but what do we have to do to, you know, with the potential risks of that fund being drawn down, and where will that leave us? So to George's point, that's well taken, as far as not committing too much more in the future until we see what's happening with the town's appetite for having that capital fund. The capital fund is a Band-Aid approach, taking that money, there's a one-time payment. It's not gonna help us 3 or 4 years when that's gone, but now our whole programs are thrown up in the air, and now all this good work we've done is just gone. And people say, wow, okay, we probably shouldn't have done that, but it's too late, it's all gone, so it's tough.
Okay. Could that capital stabilization fund ever get to a foundation of like, the ambulance fund or the water fund, where it can't be utilized anything other than for bonds that were agreed to be
We
made?
try to protect it as best we could when we
Yeah,
set
I
it up.
mean, you have to understand, the ambulance fund is a state statutory
Yeah.
thing, which is, there's a law to that, okay? The stuff that we've done here is basically been done as votes of the town meeting, so if the town meeting votes otherwise,
Right.
you can take it out. Now, in addition to that, you just mentioned like, well, 3 or 4 years, you take $1 million from that account, okay? Then next year you have to take another $1 million, and then you still are paying the $1 million that has to be there. You won't even last 2 years,
Right.
okay? I think I was mostly talking about the money that you have in there now is fixed, it's working and it's doing. But to do another barrage of things, you need to put in more seed money to keep the thing going. And if you're going to say, over here, we're going to put up another $1.9 million, $2.5 million, or whatever it comes out to be, and then when we go to put the money in, say, oh no, we're gonna use that for something else,
Right.
and the same net effect is gonna happen with it anyway, because if you go for $700 or $800 of free cash, which is what that whole article is about, then you need another $700,000 to $800,000 worth of free cash for the next year.
Right, So, yeah, so it's kind of like forced savings a little bit, you know. So you budget a little bit conservatively, you have a little bit extra money left over, and we invest in capital projects that benefit every department in the
Right.
town,
Right.
right? So instead of towns slice off a little bit of their budget for capital projects, for John's roof, for the schools, for, you know, police and fire, you know, we kinda do it here. So George budgets conservatively, we do have some money at the end, we do all these projects and everyone benefits from that.
And keep in
As they
mind,
start
we've never had to.
squeezing the budget tighter and tighter, and there's
Right.
less and less of that free cash,
Right.
there's less and less project money.
But-
So now,
At the end of the day, I mean, we get to make a recommendation, and the town gets to vote on what we
Yeah.
do with that free cash,
Mhm.
right, right.
Yeah, and that's,
People
We
listen. Oh, it's-
we can have our opinions, and there
It's a
there are
town-
a lot,
it's a
there are a
town
lot of
decision.
different, I think that there are a lot of different ways to slice up the pie. But at the end of the day, we make a recommendation, we bring it in front of the town, we say, hey, you know,
Right.
we're smart guys, we know this, we know the finance, we know what the ramifications are, we
Right.
can make a case for, we can make a case against,
Well,
we put it in front of the voters, and they get to decide.
the good thing about taping these meetings, is people do see what we talk about, and they
Yeah.
see some of the issues we're facing. That's a very positive thing. What happens in town meeting, it's a lot of emotions that night,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So it's very emotional, and they make decisions on emotion,
yeah.
without really understanding all the implications behind it. We can
So
talk.
what do we do to get these meetings out in front of people? I mean, I watch EBCAM on
Yeah, I don't know what the audience is.
But I think one of the more powerful things that we can do is to get the information out there. Whether you-
George
whether you're-
Fry's, we talk about it, we had the selectmen meeting where we went through the whole financial
Yep,
situation. I mean, those help, it helps, you know, the people that listen and pay attention, it helps educate them.
Yeah.
So they understand the problem. It's really not a complicated issue. You know,
No.
here's your revenue, you can only spend this much, and here's the pie.
Yeah,
And
what-
people want a
what-
bigger pie.
what do we want to
We don't have
invest
a
in?
bigger pie.
But it's not about the bigger pies. What do we want to invest in? We have X number of resources.
Yeah.
How do we want to allocate them?
Right.
And I think that we can all do a better job. You know, EBCAM is fantastic, thank you, by the way. But it's a great way of getting the information out into the town so that when we get to town meeting, that it's not an emotional
Right.
decision.
Right.
That it's a
Well,
thoughtful
when we say
decision.
something, they understand it, because they maybe heard us talking about it in a couple of meetings, you know?
Right.
Same with the finance committee as well, when they're taped. You know,
Right.
people see a lot of work goes on in those finance committees that
Right.
you have no clue on. And now
Right.
they just come to the meeting,
Same thing
and
with the
here's,
school committee.
here's a whole budget that you spend 2 months
Yeah.
together, and just wanna, you
Right.
know, rip it apart, like,
You know, honestly, the same thing with the school committee.
Yeah.
It's great for people to see that we're not just saying, hey,
Yeah.
we wanna spend money, we just
Right.
wanna spend all the money.
Right, right.
You know, there's two sides of the coin.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's why I'm a big fan of, you know, that I love having things taped and presented to
Yeah,
the town.
transparency, yeah.
So that they can show how we make decisions,
Yeah.
what we think about, what we value. My dad always told me, he said, you can tell me what you care about, but then show me what your budget, and I'll tell you what you actually care about. Because how you allocate your resources demonstrates what it
That's true.
is that you care about.
Right, right.
So, I mean, I think it's great that this is out there. I think it's great that we have these conversations, and I think it's great that we have representatives from the finance committee,
Yeah.
talking capital. I'm representing the school committee here on the capital planning committee as well. But, you know, the more we talk together, I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna,
Right.
but the more we talk about this stuff, the less contentious it's gonna be when it comes time to make those decisions.
Right,
That we know we're not making decisions just based on, hey, I wanna spend money, hey, I don't wanna spend
Right,
money.
right,
We're smarter than that.
Yeah.
We do have one other project that's proposed, well, just,
Back to the rubber
No.
meets the road.
no pun intended.
No, I meant that literally.
And this actually is an item that will be funded through our water system revenues. We are proposing to upgrade and replace our emergency generator at the DPW water facility. The existing one was installed in 1988. It's actually inside the building. It creates some issues with that alone. But we're looking to put a more efficient and bigger generator in as well, because in 1988, a number of the things that we do now at the garage weren't done. We've added the fleet maintenance division, the 2 bays of that. That's a 24/7 operation in snowstorms and things like that, which is typically when we seem to lose power. We've also added additional bays for storage, so we've expanded the system. So we want to upgrade the generator, as well as upgrade the service panel that's in there, the transfer switches, things like that, as well as do some security upgrade well, some security installations. There really is no security within Public Works per se. Every other building, one of the things Brian's done a great job at is moving security issues to the forefront. And it's probably time we begin to take a look at that as well at Public Works. So that would be a project that we're proposing. That's $73,500 to purchase and install the generator, the electrical upgrades.
Did you submit that one, John?
Well,
Is that on,
yeah,
is that on the list?
I
Just noticed, I didn't see it.
on
Yeah, I don't think
the,
it's
it
in
says
there.
to you on the 6th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What does it say?
I sent it to you. It's a,
On the sixth?
yeah,
That's not on this thing. So unless it was
yeah, I
caught
have
up
the
with it.
email of when I sent it, because I sent it
Yeah.
additional, I also sent the DPW inventory, the fleet inventory as well.
Maybe the girls missed it
Yeah,
and they
I can
didn't read
resend
down.
it again.
Yeah, so resend it to me, I can put it on.
Yeah, I'll
anyway.
send it around, yeah,
Yeah,
I do remember that. Maybe I just sent it, I don't know.
Oh,
Try
sorry.
to forward those.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I read through every one of them.
Again, John, so you got the generator that you'll be replacing, right? So you do have an active generator that works, right? Will that go to maybe one of the other buildings in town?
Well,
That could-
Well, what I'd like, every other building in town actually has generator backup power. What doesn't have backup power right now is the lower buildings,
Of the
of the
DPW.
original highway
So
garage.
maybe you could use that.
So that's my thought
Retrofit,
process, is
put
to
it
take that
outside,
one. I'll
shed
probably
or
actually
something.
put it, yeah, that we have, that last bay to the left is unheated, pretty much open space but secure. That's where the old, so that used to have a generator that was surplus from the Korean War.
A little old, yeah.
That failed,
Wow.
so we've been without auxiliary power down there.
So it'd be good maybe to,
So that's the game plan, we'll actually take that, relocate the existing one.
is that part of your proposal or is that something that you'll?
We'll do it
Yeah.
within the, yeah, I mean, that's, everything's there to do it, it's literally when we.
And that's out of the water enterprise fund?
Yes, yeah, it's because what I missed in the explanation of this, not only the operations of the DPW, the town's water supply is actually operated through
Oh.
the SCADA system in
Your
DPW
facility.
facility.
Right, right.
So
That
if
qualifies.
we lose the backup power for that, we have no way of monitoring our wells, tank level, things like that, because our SCADA system's down.
Right.
So I probably should have let off with that. It does say that, it actually, when you see the item, it says reliable emergency generator to operate water computer SCADA system in an emergency situation. So that's
That's the
the
purpose.
crux of,
Okay.
the rest of it's
I like it.
why it would also be beneficial, but if we wanna keep the water moving around town.
What's the generator work off of that's there now, is it a diesel?
Natural gas.
Natural gas.
Yeah, we have actually, I've been to two very interesting meetings as of late, where public safety is having discussions about the reliability of natural gas, and whether or not it may be better to have diesel
Hmm.
powered,
Or even portable propane?
possibly, yeah. Yeah, diesel, you can switch out the nozzles, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we have portable propane at one of our well sites now, at our water treatment facility number 5 does underground portable propane. Our number 2 treatment facility has natural gas. Everybody always thought natural gas was the way to go until September. Well, actually, the Merrimack Valley explosion.
Yeah.
And now, public safety as a whole is starting to look at whether natural gas is quite as reliable as everybody thought.
I still think it probably is,
It is,
yeah.
So
There-
a few risks involved, but, you know.
yeah. But I would tend to agree. I think that was
I was just curious what
yeah.
it was that was there now. and
Yeah, it's
you were
natural gas
able to-
now, the building's fed by natural gas, it's a natural gas generator.
You have gas down the lower.
No, that's actually oil, so we'd probably look at
Sort
essentially
of propane,
propane.
yeah,
Yeah.
just different nozzles.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, that was an interesting conversation when we started listening to people have. everybody's backup is natural gas heat.
Right.
And when it affects a region,
Yeah.
it's really,
That's bad.
really interesting. High school generator is a diesel generator, but all of the ones we've put in over the last few years at different locations are natural gas. So we do have some split reliability in the event of.
So do you have diesel on site?
We do, we have diesel on site here.
How long does it last before it goes bad?
It depends how much we pump out.
There's additives, but
Yeah, there's
but
that.
you'll probably need the generator to run the diesel.
Now, that's,
That thing's probably
Right.
programmed to run once a week,
what is this?
the generator.
Generator.
Actually, all of our generators, all throughout town, exercise
Weekly?
weekly.
Yeah.
They don't, it's more of an effort to exercise them with a load. We don't do that on a regular basis, but they all start, they exercise from, transfer the switch over,
Right.
weekly. And to that point, to your point, the fuel tanks, diesel fuel tanks and gasoline, we have 4,000 gallons of storage each at the fire station. Those are actually in a propane backup. So the propane tank, propane power generator there. So we pretty well,
You got
yeah.
options.
Redundancy.
Worst comes to worst, you take the top off and you got a gas powered pump and you pump it the way it needs to go. And
Yeah.
we'll keep the trucks moving as long as the fuel's there.
Right.
Good, right?
Okay.
That it?
Anything else? Any questions for John? Yep. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Good evening.
So you'll get us a packet on that or send something out?
Yeah, he already sent it to me. so
Yeah,
I'll
I
forward
can
it on.
resend it.
Yeah. What was that cost?
$783.5 for the, that's purchase, furnish, install. The purchase and furnish of the generators, the run is about $40,000. The additional will be the electrical upgrade and the related
Is
security.
that include moving the other one, the old one down?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll make all that happen. We'll do the same.
Yeah, it's all part of the same project.
I'm good.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent.
You want me to send it to you?
No,
Okay.
if I can't find it, I'll ask. All right, so we should go through the package real quick and see what's left. We'll try to schedule some meetings. George sent out a timeline. I think we have to be wrapped up by March 25th. So it doesn't leave us a whole lot of time. What's that? I know, it's amazing, right? June. Oh, yeah, it seems like a pretty aggressive timeline, like,
Well, it came down to teacher negotiations, they needed
Yeah.
to get the
Yeah.
contracts done.
as far as like ours, I mean, I gotta think of like March 25th.
Yeah.
That's everything, decided and I'm like, wow, it's, for a June town meeting, it seems a little early.
Was that given to you before the
I don't know.
town meeting had been moved?
I'll check that, but, if that's the case, I was gonna propose that we meet a couple more, maybe either on Monday night or a Wednesday of the
I
same
love
week.
the idea of being aggressive, but, if we have the time, then we should use the time.
Who else do we need to see?
That's what I mean, let's go through that, we need fire and schools.
The fire for the 6th, you gotta confirm it, it just
Excellent.
needs to confirm the chief.
What's-
And then we need to get Brian back.
What's Brian have left?
Well, we need to read the assessments.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Get him back to
Yeah.
discuss that.
Okay,
And then some of these things of the school, are attached to the school building as an essential school, like kitchen fan and stuff like that, which Brian should have his hands on and be able to give some information more than John Shea,
so if we have to be done by the 25th, say that's the case to the selectmen, we only have 3 meetings.
See you.
So good night, guys.
Take care, John.
Which isn't much time, really, to meet with everybody, then we need a meeting or two to discuss our own, discuss what we wanna prioritize.
It's only 3 weeks away. So,
Well, we can check with George on that again, see
Yeah.
if that's.
You mind calling him tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll call him.
And just find out what our true timeline is?
Yeah,
That would, if not, I was gonna propose we meet, next Monday if we wanted, the 4th and the 6th, then we can bang out a couple of groups, you know what I mean? And maybe George there's no selectmen meeting next Monday, George could join us again if we wanted to
Okay.
continue on with some of that discussion, or he
Yeah.
could.
So you wanna go for the 4th, and then we'll figure out if
Well,
we
we have
need
one
the
for the,
6th?
we have one for the 6th already.
The fire chief, we just have to confirm
Just
it.
to confirm with the fire chief. I was gonna throw an extra
You
one
wanna
in.
get Brian for the 4th and fire chief for the 6th?
What do you guys
You
think?
don't think we can do both of them one night? No?
Yeah, we can double up some of those too, that's true.
And we kinda already know what Ryan's summary,
Yeah.
what he's bringing to us, it's just.
Okay, so see, the 6th we do, the fire chief and Brian,
Yeah.
then we have the 13th, is that the schools?
Yeah, we'll do schools,
I think that's what I told
Try to
you.
take a
Where
good
the
bite
six-
up front, try to front load this as much as we can, so that if we do find ourselves with our backs against the wall on time, that we're dealing with, smaller
Right, right.
content,
Yeah.
So,
So the schools were big ones, so we could get those done. Yeah, I think I told John Shea, maybe, I'm not sure if I said the 6th or the 13th. What did the schedule say, Dave, my original?
It doesn't say.
Oh, okay. I'll confirm with John tomorrow. I think I might have him on for the 6th. The schools. If that's the case, we can have maybe, if you wanna meet with Brian the fire chief and Brian, we can move them to the 13th. Then, I think town clerk has one, the voting booths, but that's not even a capital project, it's below the threshold. So we don't really.
it's like 6,000.
That's not even ours.
We don't.
Yeah, I don't think
George-
we need to
George
tackle
George
that.
can bring forward
He can
that.
just-
Did you even put that on the free cash thing?
He did.
Yes, you.
So we'll get that information out of George, so it's really,
Yeah,
the schools, and then we'll double up Ryan and the fire.
Okay, so,
So is there already a setup for the schools, or?
I think there might be this, I think I might have told John the 6th when I was talking to him. But, I don't know if I can confirm with him, but I think I told him tentatively the 6th, I think they can make it. Him and
Oh,
his-
another email here. You got, the schools on the 13th.
Oh, okay,
Need to confirm fire on the 6th, you need to confirm.
okay,
So there you go, so we can probably get the fire on the 6th, and
yeah.
Brian on the 6th, and then hopefully the schools
Okay.
on 13th.
Yeah, let's do that,
That sounds fair.
okay?
And then we can talk to George about the voting booths, correct?
Yeah, I think we're
We
gonna.
don't have to worry about it.
So that one,
What time was that?
That's another thing, when do you guys wanna start?
6 again?
Wanna do 6?
6 is great.
6
I
works,
can do
Dan?
6.
Yeah.
Okay. 6 o'clock it is. So that's the next 2 meetings, and that will give us the 20th if we needed to kinda wrap up and, decide how we wanna, how much money we have to spend, how much we
Yeah.
wanna spend, do we wanna save any? Because we talked a lot about the central school.
Yep.
For Dan and Rob, you guys weren't here the last couple of years, but, the central school would be a concern for all of us, and, there's some big projects like the police department, like,
Right.
that's really not a good facility they have. We talked about combining them with a fire,
Mhm.
that's another big project, you know what I mean? So we're thinking about some of those longer term projects as well as the short term stuff.
Sure.
So that's why in that fund, we're trying to, just because George will say, oh, we have 800,000 in free cash, and I'm gonna put some in the stabilization, we don't have to spend every nickel.
Right.
Our job is to say, well, we may have some bigger projects, let's put a little bit away,
Correct.
and then we can use that for our
But I
bond.
think free cash is a tough phrase, he mentioned that. I always
Yeah.
think of it as unrestricted funds rather than free cash, which is a much easier way to kind of process it.
Right, right,
Because it
right.
gets into people's heads.
Well, it's been an
We get to
ongoing
make
problem
decisions
over the
about it.
years,
It's not
is
just
that-
money that we can blow.
Right.
It's
Right.
money that we get to make decisions about.
But I think the biggest part of that was that a lot of it is payments going forward over what we've already spent,
Sure.
that
Right.
people are missing.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted
But
to
if
comment on.
that's the case, I'd like to say that we should restrict it.
One of the big things that we talked about at the central school was, and even if it is over the course of years, is that we took on smaller projects, which they're bigger projects, but they're also not as big as doing an override and building a new school.
Right.
So that's kind of why we went that direction.
Yeah.
That was the course.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
you're putting boilers in, right? You're not gonna rip it down if you put $1.5 million in boilers.
Well, my,
That would be,
yeah.
that would be,
But if
that
it-
would be like
Right.
what this town had done for a number of years. We put a lot of money in that old high school.
Yeah.
Well, right before we tore it down, like, a couple of years before we upgraded.
$400,000
We still
track.
owe on it?
Yeah,
That was-
But we
We
did,
want that, don't we?
Yeah, we're paying on the
yeah,
track.
tennis
Still
court,
been on-
put out a bunch of stuff.
but we did do the structural, it was looked at structurally, and it's structurally sound.
Right,
So even if we get the mechanicals up to speed and up to today, then realistically, if the room looks old or not is irrelevant.
Right.
It's still a structurally sound building that has new mechanics.
Right.
And then we, in the future, strive to make it better looking.
Yeah, well, it won't have the convenience of the new.
Yeah, it's not gonna be the high school, I think that's the
Right.
whole,
Right.
it's not gonna be to the level of high school.
You know, like maybe have sinks in every room and all these other things and all the new.
I think, well, you know, Hanson went through it not too long ago, a couple of years ago. After they did the new high school, they went in, had on their agenda, I think it's called the Indian School, up by like 1458, whether to pump money into that or redo it. And there was a big push. It actually went to 2 votes. It first got voted down, and secondarily it got voted down as well, because there was limited appetite.
Well, we'd have to, we're already in an override, so we would be asking for another override if we went a different route.
But realistically, we may have to ask for a debt service override to just remodel that one. If we're talking 18 million, if we have to look at the assessment, do we need to do all that?
Well, I think that the point was is that, like we said, we already talked about doing mechanics.
Right.
A lot of what, those other things that we talked about aren't, you
Well,
know,
that's what's important to look. to look at this
necessity as
assessment.
of today.
Right, right,
And if we did it over time and over years,
yeah.
well, we'll look at the assessment.
Mhm.
Personally, we keep spending money on assessments, and I
But-
would rather,
Well, assessments are information, and you're asking voters to make big decisions, you know, without an assessment, how do you know? You just guess? Yeah, we think
Well,
it's gonna be a
well,
lot of
that-
money, and that's
well-
millions of dollars, like, well,
well-
how much and for what? I don't know, it's just a
Well,
lot
I
of
mean-
money, throwing money at it, you know, you gotta have this, the assessments, I agree with you. 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand is a lot of money, but without that data, how are we gonna make, how can we make decisions? And how do you prioritize?
well, we did by
Like,
looking
I
to
don't,
see.
you know, I like Brian and all that, but I don't want Brian to be the sole person to say, this is what we need to do this year, you know.
Well, I think
you
what
need a
you
little bit-
also have to, I think every other department is a little weary of all the money going to one thing, because it affects their departments.
All right,
So you've got a climate within town where,
yeah, that's
so
true,
they're all,
yeah.
I get it.
There are financial considerations, there are political
Right.
considerations, I
So
mean,
that's,
this is,
but,
this is a cocktail.
but we know that
We're
the
talking
building,
about
but
stirring
we
everything
talked about
together.
the building was structurally sound. The mechanics right now are, in the process of being updated.
Right, right.
So to me, we've already made the
Decision,
decision.
right?
Yeah, the decision's been made, we've already did it, we're investing into it. So to me, we should be continuing that path.
I mean, I think if you set forward to go put boilers in something, you wouldn't say, okay, well, let's put the boilers in and plan B is we're gonna put a new school up.
Right.
That's just,
I think that was the assessment that we've already made
Yeah.
in our past, couple of years of dealing with the central school.
So now it's a matter of looking at the assessment and seeing what's the most important, like safety or efficiencies, and start chipping
Mhm.
away or prioritizing for our longer term plan. Maybe do a 10-year plan, what can go that long, what can go 10 years.
Well, I think,
I tend to rely on the advice of experts.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on school construction or,
Right.
or, the viability of one thing. I do know that if I make a mistake in making an investment into something that I shouldn't have made an investment into, I don't try to compound that mistake by putting
well, if
more
you-
money after.
If you look in.
After
Bad, bad,
Yeah,
and
in a-
it's so,
you're
but
right.
at the same time, like, I do like to have that data and find out, did we make a good investment?
Well,
Is it the right thing to
if you
do?
look
Shall
at
we
our
continue
bonds,
that way?
Now, the ones we're paying for buildings that we tore down.
Sure.
So
Well, I know.
quite frankly, that's what we're trying to
Yeah, but you
avoid.
want
But if
something
that's the
10
right
years, 15
decision,
Because we don't wanna
years.
be paying on that bond of doing the mechanics in the central
No,
school.
But versus
As
having a
we're-
dilapidated, failing structure, if I had to make a choice, I'm saying that, you're very clear in your opinion, it's a great opinion, I have one
yeah.
too. But I think that everything has to be based on the data that we have in front of us. And to go back to your point about assessments, I'm in favor of them. We have to have this independent, outside group that wants to evaluate, is the structure sound?
Well, if we want
Is it
their
worthy
decisions,
of
we already
investment?
have that.
Well, we have,
Yeah,
we've done that last year.
if we're gonna look for outside investment from the state, from the MSPC, we need to have that.
Right, well, if we wanna make decisions as a committee,
Back decisions based
No,
upon that.
our
not-
own
not
decisions based on our own analysis of the data,
Yeah.
then we need that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have to rely on other people to tell us what's the best idea or the best move forward and either support it or not.
Right,
But if we wanna be the one recommending, based on our work, then we need the data.
but I think we need to make our decisions based upon the financial impact,
Yeah.
not the
And
political.
then just try to prioritize it.
I don't know if that's political as they get, but.
Well, I just remember the political people that sat in the meeting and told us how good it was for us to do the high school at the time, and, I think some
I
of them.
can't speak to that, I wasn't
I
there.
think some of them are in jail now, so.
I can't speak to that, I was not there.
Again, we just, you need to start thinking Chevrolet versus Rolls Royce. To Chevrolet town,
I drive a Chevy.
it's a good car,
That's how you
and
say
it goes great, but you don't need to price yourself into situations to where we shouldn't, again, to your point, Chris, it's a beautiful school over there. That's a really expensive school for the town of East Bridgewater.
I'm not regretting that we did it, it's
No, I'm
done,
not
and we
either.
did that, and we're paying for it, but we're paying for it.
Right.
And quite frankly, we made an assessment to what we looked at the central school, and we asked to make sure it was structurally sound, and those things were done already to make the assessment for us to agree to vote
Right,
on,
right.
to have the mechanics done in the school.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't wanna throw good money after bad, like,
Right.
to me, we made the decision now that we are gonna repair and, try to extend the life of the central school to avoid another new school at this point.
I think the school department seems to be on board with it. They're the ones that went after that grant and, they're the ones investing the money as well.
I can't speak for anybody else on the
No,
school
I'm-
committee,
I'm-
just my personal opinion is that there isn't an appetite for a new central school.
Right.
There isn't an appetite.
I don't think on either side, schools or
Yeah,
town, I don't think anybody
I
wants that.
think that is an icon of the town, I think that people,
The funny part is you turn that building over to a contractor, they'll make condos in there, and that building will be there for 300 years.
It would be.
Right,
And-
but we can't
and-
maintain it for
but
50
see, I-
years, you gotta tear it
right.
down, but a contractor will keep it for 150 years and make tons of money. But
They
Tear it
took,
down.
they took all the churches in my old neighborhood in Somerville and turned them into condos, and, the
Oh, yeah,
parish is all.
Well, isn't there an old high
filled,
school around the
and
corner?
they elevated
Yeah,
them
the
to multi-million
the
dollar.
intermediate school is now the senior,
Right.
one of the senior centers.
Yeah,
That was the intermediate school for years. But I understand, you can have a study and they can tell you could put another addition over here or over
Right.
there, but, those end up being a lot more money, in my opinion, than
Mm.
what we're already, because we're already investing. We're
Well,
already investing.
that's a good point, and maybe
Yeah.
talk to Brian about that,
Yeah.
and say we've already kinda committed to this, so at this point, so.
And I understand
Fisher
what he's
got
saying,
paid.
that you can have 100 different people saying, why didn't you do this or that? Well,
Yeah.
that's why we
That's all gonna
prioritized, and we put a big, amount of time into it, and we did a big financial investment into the repairs.
Right.
So to me, we've already made that decision that we're gonna,
I mentioned it a while ago, and I think we talked about it. You feasibly can't do it because you need to bond for certain projects, but it would be nice to be able to go out and borrow, figure out what everything's gonna be, roof, windows, the whole kit and caboodle. Go out and take a bond for $17 million over the next 10 years and have committed somewhere legally that you're gonna use that for purposes. You can make the interest on that money over the next period of time. Would pay for some of the offset of that, I would think.
Some of it, but not all of it.
No, it certainly would, but
Yeah, where you get the principal for that,
you go out and bond with the commitment that you're,
No, how do you pay the bond back, with what money?
well, you're doing the bond.
So like
You're
he's
gonna be
saying,
doing the bond,
you're-
instead of spreading it out over 10 years, the bond process, go get all the money up front and house it, and be your own bank, and go in there and say, okay,
Right, but when you get that big bond, the next month you gotta start paying that back, you're gonna use that money to pay it?
you gotta be doing it anyways, right?
No, we're talking about spreading it over 10 years. You're
Right.
talking about borrowing up front, and then put it
But
in the
the
bank.
interest on that money up front,
Oh, yeah, it's a little interest, but I don't think it's gonna offset, it's not gonna offset those big payments. It would have to
but
be,
you're gonna be
You gotta
making
find
a big
someone to
payment
buy into
anyways.
no, the whole point is to spread out the payments and make them smaller over the.
I think what he's saying, just like we're talking about, how he showed us how the free cash is dropping.
Right,
is to set aside, all right, 500,000 of this per year is going to that, and we can't,
Well,
Move.
if that's the case, if you can
Right.
commit that,
and we're committing to that, that's what I think
That's what I'm
he's
saying. That's
right?
Kinda what it's saying.
Yeah,
right,
That's a tough sell.
that is a tough sell.
I'm a good salesman, I don't think I can sell that.
Yeah.
no, I mean, right now, we're,
Legally, that capital, and I mentioned it to George, I'd love to see where, why, if you've committed those monies, that those monies can be taken away from you at any given time. But it's tough, you've already committed to the bank.
I know, that's tough, yeah.
I don't know why
how-
legally
That's
that
gonna put us
should be.
I don't know how that can't be changed, or in a town meeting, vote
Well, the
somehow,
town meeting-
that can't be,
Voted to create that, to
Right.
fund that.
so I
They
can't,
can vote to dismantle it.
yeah,
They just need to understand the implications of that. So, yeah, the town body can do that legally, like, I think John Clifford will say, yeah, that, they can do that, but what's the impact of that?
right.
Who's gonna pay for all these things we committed, like
But
this?
also, what's the sales job to get the town, if you?
I know.
I-
The thing with the
to get
capital,
people on
the
board.
capital serves every town
Extraordinary.
here. So the capital is kind of a neutral committee, like, we're not, like, we represent schools, police, fire,
Yeah.
everybody. Everyone benefits from the capital plan,
Yeah,
right, the funding, so for, you know, who wants to ruin that? Who wants to raid it and do away with it? It seems penny wise and pound foolish, a little short-sighted, you know, for the longer term benefits of all these departments, because what would happen next is no more capital. We went through, I don't know if you guys don't remember, maybe Dave, I don't know, Chris, if you are, but for a while, we had no capital
No, I really,
projects.
it was
We didn't even hardly
awful
meet.
in the beginning.
I mean, George, like, we got no money. Okay, no capital
Well, we-
meetings. Remember Dave, do you remember that?
yeah.
Like, I forget what years it was, but it was, you know, a while back, but.
Well, it would get robbed from us on the 11th hour, pretty
Yeah,
much
but
every
for a
year.
while,
Yeah.
I mean, we're so tight financially, which is like, we don't have any free cash, we don't have any money.
Yep.
So there were really no projects, we put a lot of stuff on hold. And that's why we came back kinda, when George, you know, we started funding it a little bit more aggressively to kinda get the backlog done.
Sure.
And then created the fund, and then it started really working well. But for a while there, we weren't doing anything, and you could see it in the town.
Yeah.
You know, it really started looking bad, so we certainly don't wanna go there.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion.
Second.